Now, just a few days ago, Senator Jeff Flake, a senator from Arizona for the Republican Party, gave his retirement speech, in which he announced at the end of his term in January 2019 he was going to leave the Senate and would not be running again. Now, his main reason for doing so was the behavior and the all-around presidency of Donald Trump, and then went on to describe how Trump was one of the biggest disgraces that the White House had ever seen, and then went and gave a 17-minute speech lambasting the president for his behavior and the way that he's run his administration. Now, his opening statement was very significant.
And there are times when we must risk our careers in favor of our principles. Now is such a time. It must also be said that I rise today with no small measure of regret. Regret because of the state of our disunion. Regret because of the disrepair and destructiveness of our politics. Regret because of the indecency of our discourse. Regret because of the coarseness of our leadership. Regret for the compromise of our moral authority. And by our, I mean all of our, complicity in this alarming and dangerous state of affairs.
Now, his opening statement was certainly very significant. He is right here. What he is saying has the tremendous potential to completely bury his career. What he has said about Trump, aside from being true, is very detrimental to the continuation of his position within the Republican Party. And he is there's no doubt in my mind that he's going to be punished for this. Essentially, Trump will use the Republican Party to harm him in some way for having said these things about him, regardless of whether or not they're actually true. And he's right. By making a move like this, you are essentially sacrificing your career. Now, he criticized Trump's petty, childish behavior, his very unpresidential way of acting, both on the microphone and on social media. Trump has almost exclusively acted without thinking. He has said whatever has come to mind without even considering the political consequences of what he is saying. In other words, he has failed to act like the statesman that a president is supposed to be. And Trump has failed tremendously in his position to remain professional. Now, Flake went on to criticize the Republican Party for blindly following Trump when they, too, should be criticizing him.
Now, I'm aware that more politically savvy people than I will caution against such talk. I am aware that there is a segment of my party that believes that anything short of complete and unquestioning loyalty to a president who belongs to my party is unacceptable and suspect. If I have been critical, it is not because I relish criticizing the behavior of the President of the United States. If I have been critical, it is because I believe it is my obligation to do so.
Oh, he's right. Technically, if we want to go by how it is that bourgeois democracy is supposed to be, or at least the image that it's intended to give the public, is that no, you're not supposed to simply mindlessly follow the leader of the country, do whatever the head of the party says, regardless of whether or not you think it's right or wrong, or whether it's professional or unprofessional, the right or the wrong thing to do. That goes against the very idea of a representative democracy. The person elected is supposed to carry out the will of the people who elected him, not necessarily the head of the party. And then when everybody comes together with their competing ideas and interests, the ones they can agree on, they get together, agree to do, and the ones they don't agree on end up part of a political struggle. But as we can see, that's not been the way it is. The Republican Party has remained a very solid core for a very long time who have supported each other regardless of anything that ever happens. And this is the very nature of politics, and the Democrats aren't any different in this regard. But he is specifically criticizing the Republicans, saying that they're supposed to be better than this when they're not. They're the same. If anything, they're worse at it. They're worse for it than the Democratic Party is. Now, I would actually criticize his naivete when it comes to American patriotism. Now, he has this falsehood that American exceptionalism and so-called American democracy, like he believes in that fantasy that we're fed about the United States.
To announce that there must be no criticism of the president, or that we are to stand by a president, right or wrong, is not only unpatriotic and servile, but is morally treasonable to the American public, unquote. Acting on conscience and principle in a manner is the manner in which we express our moral selves, and as such, loyalty to conscience and principle should supersede loyalty to any man or party. We can all be forgiven for failing in that measure from time to time. I certainly put myself at the top of the list of those who fall short in this regard. I am holier than none. But too often we rush to salvage principle, not to salvage principle, but to forgive and excuse our failures so that we might accommodate them and go right on failing until the accommodation itself becomes our principle.
I mean, there's no question that this never criticizing the president, you have to follow him and support him no matter what, even if you didn't vote for him, he's your president kind of thing, is about as American can get. There is nothing that just recently developed surrounding Donald Trump. This is the way it's always been. And this has been more of a conservative talking point than it has been a Democrat point, although both of them have used it. In the past, I mean, one merely has to look to the Cold War, where if you disagreed with the president for anything, you were possibly a communist, and then thus had to be subject to all the fascism that people back then would suffer as a result of someone suspecting them of being a communist. And this goes right through the war on terror. This has been the hallmark of the war on terror. You don't criticize what the government is doing to try to protect you from terrorism, or you're one of the terrorists yourself. If you oppose the USA Patriot Act, you must be a terrorist, because it's wholly necessary a thing to do in order to protect you from the boogeyman that's out there. So I don't know what he's talking about when he's acting as though this is a new thing that has existed under Donald Trump. It most certainly is not. This is a thing that has been a hallmark of America. Fighting the British, the same kind of thing. The Cold War. I mean, it's World War II. Hell, even World War I. It's the same kind of thing that has always existed. This non-questioning of the government and the president. And this really wasn't any different with Obama. When Obama went around bombing the third world, where was the Republican Party to question him on it, whether or not it was right or wrong? Of course, they weren't anywhere. They were cheering him on doing it because they're bigger war hawks than he was. Because these things happen because the ruling class wants them to happen. These happen in the interests of capital. And these elected officials are representatives of big capital. So that's why there really is no debate on these kinds of things. Oh, they can argue back and forth about welfare systems, taxes, but when it comes down to the very nitty-gritty of capital accumulation itself, there really is no debate. And Obama was a perfect example of that. Now, this next example of American exceptionalism that's put out by Flake just completely blows my mind.
When the United States emerged from World War II, we contributed about half of the world's economic activity. It would have been easy to secure our dominance, keeping those countries who had been defeated or greatly weakened during the war in their place. We didn't do that. It would have been easy to focus inward. We resisted those impulses. Instead, we financed reconstruction of shattered countries and created international organizations and institutions that have helped provide security and foster prosperity around the world for more than 70 years. Now it seems that we, the architects of this visionary, rules-based world order that has brought so much freedom and prosperity, are the ones most eager to abandon it.
What he just described is what happened. The American empire did rise at the end of World War II. Yeah, they put money into developing Western Europe. That was only because they wanted to stop the Soviet Union from expanding. They wanted to stop the example that the Soviets had given. I mean, they built the U.S. imperialism essentially really took off at the conclusion of World War II. I mean, he's outright lying at this point. The United States has forced its way into a hegemonic position. One only has to look so far as the Bretton Woods Agreement. The U.S. currency becoming the world's reserve currency, the creation of the petrodollar. I mean, he's outright lying here. In many of the places where the imperialist countries occupied, like where the Japanese occupied or the British occupied, the U.S. moved in on many of those places. The Philippines is a perfect example. Once the Japanese were defeated, the U.S. became the occupier inside the Philippine Islands. This is absolutely absurd. This kind of idea that America acted in an altruistic way is a complete and utter fraud. This is a lie of epic proportions. This is as big a bunch of BS as basically anything he could have said. And then after that, he sets the tone for what the Republican Party actually is.
It is clear at this moment that a traditional conservative who believes in limited government and free markets, who is devoted to free trade, who is pro-immigration, has a narrower and narrower path to nomination in the Republican Party, the party that has so long defined itself by its belief in those things.
Okay, this is definitely what the Republican Party stands for. There's no doubt about that. I mean, this is their bread and butter. This is their basis. Free market capitalism and minimal government. But these things are bad. I mean, these things have been proven bad for the American people constantly. And not only have we seen that it's bad for the American people, it's bad for business as well. A truly free market is completely unstable and is inherently contradictory as it causes its own destruction. That's why government regulation exists to begin with. Because not only will companies screw people, companies will screw each other, and then you need a whole legal apparatus to deal with that. So, I mean, these things that, like, he then talks about how the Republican Party is so altruistic and good because it believes in the free market and minimal government, while forgetting that these things are completely horrible things for the American people and for the economy, both domestically and globally as well. It's just astounding that even after all this time, that view is still being upheld, no matter how incorrect it is proven to be. And then he outright lies when it comes to talking about the founding of America and its principles.
We were not made great as a country by indulging in or even exalting our worst impulses, turning against ourselves, glorifying in the things that divide us, and calling fake things true and true things fake.
These vices, the whole point of America has been for people to go after their own vices, to pursue their own rational economic self-interest, free from the interference of feudal notions of land ownership. I can do whatever I want with my business to accumulate money. One of the things the founding fathers were big on was selling marijuana, was about selling guns, was about slavery. They did chase their vices. They did chase whatever it is that they wanted that was best for them. He's absolutely lying when he says this. I mean, this is absolute and complete BS. The founding fathers literally stood for being able to pursue whatever it is you want, your own vices, but without the interference of the church and the ideas about who can own property based on their relationship to the monarchy. It's absolutely, it's a ridiculous oversimplification of how the United States works. And probably most perplexing of all is that he seems completely confused on how the world actually sees the U.S.
And we did not become the beacon of freedom in the darkest corners of the world by flouting our institutions and failing to understand just how hard-won and vulnerable they are.
The world doesn't see you as a beacon of anything good. This is not true. The United States is not a beacon of freedom for the rest of the world that the rest of the world wants to follow. They see you as an imperialist occupier, as the bully of the world who presses their jackboot on everyone else in order to get what they want, in order to take a country's resources, access to its markets, to its cheap labor pool. I mean, this is a lie. Nobody sees you that way. The world doesn't look up to the United States. The world hates the United States. And it has hated the United States for decades. This is just simply ridiculous. This is the kind of fantasy that exists in the heads of Republicans and Democrats. They think that we, the rest of the world, look up to you. We despise you. We despise you for what you represent. Unrestrained capital, going after whatever it is you want, having essentially no moral compass whatsoever, for killings of tens of millions of people for profit? I mean, no, come on. But that's the American exceptionalism speaking. That's what he really thinks. I mean, it's utterly ridiculous. For everything that Flake says about Donald Trump, which is true, he makes absolutely fair and right criticisms of Donald Trump. And I guess you can, in a way, say that the Republican Party has lost its way. I don't think it has. It just has somebody who's bad at the top. The Republican Party is still everything that it has been. Completely in the pocket of big business without any regard to anyone else, seeking to destroy anything that tries to help people in America, like a better healthcare system, etc., Social Security and everything else, to get rid of regulation over the financial sector of the economy. It doesn't seem to be anything is really different in this regard. The only difference is there's someone very unpresidential, very unprofessional that is at the helm of all of this right now. And that seems to be what really bothers him. Not that the Republican Party is doing all the things that it always does, but the fact that someone is doing it in a way that makes them look bad. What Trump has really done here that's really set Flake off is remove the veil of what the Republican Party is. The Republican Party has always been to completely attack working class people. It has always been a racist, sexist, homophobic organization. It doesn't overtly say that, but it's there. They don't directly say it, but it's there in the policies and the choices that it makes. But it gives a veneer of, we're trying to do this. But what Trump has done was rip that veil off, and everybody sees it for really what it is. In other words, the Republican Party can't pretend it isn't what it is, when that's been its whole thing. The veil, a large part of that veil has been Christian conservatism, when really it was just conservatism, and the veil was Christianity. It's always been about big business and pursuing, self-interest at any cost, but it has always been given this veneer of a very presidential and organized and professional manner that is the office of the president. And that has been torn asunder as a result of the personal behavior of Donald Trump. And I think that really what gets him. I think it's hypocritical for him to be angry about what the U.S. government or what the Republican Party has been doing, because it doesn't change the way that the Republican Party has always been. What has changed is the way that it has been perceived. Thank you for watching. If you like this program, then please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. It's your donations that keep this program running. Also, if you would like, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share in various social media.